This live broadcast is brought to you by Eagle Truck Center, soaring to new heights. The Outdoor News, fishing and outdoors for our area. Acadiana Mortgage, over 23 years in the mortgage business. SmarterGeek, making technology easier. And the many supporters, donations, and folks sharing information and watching out. Now, grab your popcorn and a drink. Here we go. Hey, the software did play nicely. It brought us into the right screen with the right show number. Well, we're not flying completely by the seat of our pants tonight. Just almost.
Well, it's almost as if, we had a really short ad intro in the beginning. We're trying doing that at the start, and I think that's the best way of doing it. But
yeah, well,
it was a little shorter than normal.
A little shorter. I kind of hit the wrong button and did the really short one instead of the regular one, which I'm going to kind of redo our intro anyway. But anyway, that's semantics, neither here nor there. We were kind of rambling. For any of you that are new to watching the show, we're rambling for just a minute or two to allow people to get their notifications, and then we'll bring our guest on in just a couple of minutes. So who is our guest? What are we talking about tonight?
Well, there's this little organization out there that they've been friends of ours, and our guest, he's not new to kind of what we do. He's been on Bossier Watch before, and they got this little group called LACAG, and kind of a political bunch, and they're a little active, and they like to hold politicians accountable and bring light to legislation and bills that are of importance, especially to the limited government types. And their illustrious leader is none other than Chris Alexander from the famed and heralded Alexander family.
Well, let me hit the magic button and let's just bring him on. How about that? Can you hear us, Chris?
I can hear you well. How are you boys doing?
Too bad tonight.
Good.
Well, I tried to pump you up as much as I could, but I mean, everything I said was true. I didn't lie about anything.
I didn't hear any lies.
Well, I mean, look, y'all's family, the Alexander family is heralded to me and in conservative and Republican circles for sure. You guys have always been on, I would describe it as the limited government conservative train, and your family's done a lot to promote, conservative Republican ideals.
Well, we certainly have come by it honest, beginning at about age 5, guys, being basically dumped out of a station wagon at the corner of Erie and Line Avenue and told to go up to a door and put a spiel on for a guy who was running for state rep or state senate by the name, I think, of Art Sauer or B.F. O'Neill, one of those guys, and said, go sell our candidate. I'm like, what am I supposed to say, Pop? And I said, read the push card, get up there and do it. So we kind of got thrown in, early into the political advocacy process.
That's awesome. Really? So
by fire.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I didn't think about that, and we had not considered even chatting about this at the start of this show, but that's intriguing to me because, like my kids, I mean, they were young, and I was dragging them to football fields to hand out flyers. I can remember recently when Jeff Landry first ran for AG, I had my kids. We were going to football games all over, handing out flyers. That's how it happens, isn't it?
And you know what? It is, Duke. So your boys, they will look back on that and be thankful to you that you made them do that, because it requires a certain amount of poise. It requires the ability to kind of think on your feet a little bit if they ask you a question. Sometimes it even requires you to be able to have a door closed in your face and just move on to the next house. So it kind of teaches you how to handle rejection. Royal was the only, Royal lies about it and says that we used to get a nickel for every vote we would get committed to. My dad would give us a nickel. So Royal, just to beat me, he would just lie and say that, yeah, I got 30 houses on this street. I said, BS, you got 30. There's only 15 houses on the street. How did you get 30?
Oh, that's awesome.
He's like, look, that's the story. And if you tell Pop anything any different, I'm just going to whip your ass. I said, you can't do that to me anymore. I'm bigger than you now.
A
That is
brotherly
awesome.
love. That's hilarious.
Well, this organization, LACAG, in which, Rex and I, for the most part, know about it, but I think you're the illustrious leader of LACAG, and you guys are doing some good thing. Real quick, tell everybody about LACAG and why LACAG is important and why, what you guys are doing.
Well, Rex, when I first went down to the legislature a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now, I realized that very quickly that just because we have a supermajority of Republicans does not necessarily mean that we have a supermajority of conservatives. And unfortunately, too many of the Republicans in our legislature are sort of more aligned with the special interests and even more aligned with the Democrats. Now, we've done a lot to clean that up. But one thing that I've noticed that causes them to take notice of us, of LACAG, is that we're always there. We're always monitoring their votes on critical issues, and we're always making sure that their constituents know exactly what they did and how they did it, even though they try to do things secretly, like in committee, in ways that they don't want people to know about. They kill 60 or 70% of the good bills down here in committee, and they want to do it kind of in ways where it's not going to be on a scorecard that the organizations do. And so we monitor all that very, very closely, and we always give good praise when the legislators do the right thing, but we always respectfully, disclose and expose when they do things that are contrary to the interests of Louisiana citizens. And I've just noticed that there are so many big special interest lobbyists down there. And the first time I went down there, I'm saying to myself, well, who represents the ordinary Louisiana citizens from Evangeline Parish or Caddo or Bossier? Who represents the ordinary citizens across the state? And nobody was doing it. So I said, well, somebody's got to do it. So we started our citizen advocacy organization, and everything that we do is based on two considerations. Does it serve the ordinary, hardworking Louisiana citizen, and is it constitutional? Those are the two main criteria. Most fundamentally, is it constitutional? Because that's our bent and that's our loyalty. And it's amazing how we've grown in a relatively short period of time, because people are hungry for information, and they're hungry for people who will stand up and fight for them in the legislature and on issues that matter, just like you guys do. You guys do it so well, and really, really have made such a great contribution the way that you expose the corruption and wrongdoing and graft. I really enjoy listening to your program also for the very reason that I'm glad for what we do as well. And so that's how we got started, and we are moving forward very rapidly. And we're in the middle of a very busy session right now, where we're keeping tabs on the legislators, and some good ones from right up in your area are doing some really good things down there this session. Dodie Horton, Thomas Presley, Raymond Cruz is doing some really good stuff this session. So we're just excited to be on the front lines. We call ourselves the legislative German shepherds of the average Louisiana citizen. So that's where we are, and we're enjoying it.
So y'all literally run them down in the halls of the legislature and grab them by the ankles and bite them and tackle them, right?
I had my teeth sunk into the legs of one of the legislators just earlier today.
So I've got a question though, and I can't remember if I've asked this before. I probably have, but I ask it pretty much of everybody. So it's kind of a two-part question. One, define conservative as you see it. And number two, give some examples of bad legislation versus good legislation that you can kind of think of off the top of your head.
I would define conservative probably the way that Thomas Jefferson did, Rex, which is basically I look at government as a necessary evil. And as Thomas Paine said, at best, government is a necessary evil, and at worst, it's an intolerable evil. So I think it's impossible, I think, to be a conservative without having an intrinsic and healthy skepticism of everything that the government does. At this point, my presumption is always against the government whenever it does anything. And I believe that the only real place for government action is to prevent harm from one citizen to another, or to prevent one citizen from directly infringing the rights of another. Other than that, I really don't think that the government has much of a role in our lives. Some people would say that I'm more of a libertarian even than I am a conservative. But I think at heart, to be a conservative is to love the Constitution and to have a healthy skepticism of the government, and to always remember that the government does not exist to give us anything. The government exists simply to secure rights that are ours by nature and by God. They don't give us anything. We don't have to get their permission for anything that has to do with our own private lives and the concerns of our own well-being. And so that's more or less the way I would describe it.
Well, Chris, you know what you're saying, in which Rex and I, we always have this debate. We always about this conservative, and I know that's why Rex prodded you about conservative, because this definition of conservative, we hear, moderates and even Democrats saying, "Oh, I'm a conservative," and the term is just overused, and a lot of people that use it are no more conservative than black is white. And, that's why I try to use the term limited government. And I know Rex agrees with me, because, that's really kind of what we're talking about. And I also think, on our show, believe it or not, we actually have a lot of moderates and Democrats that watch our show. They believe that we because we criticize Republicans, and don't get me wrong, Republicans need criticism as well, too. But, I think there's a lot of Democrats that don't know that they're really limited government types. I think there really is. I believe that. Do you feel the same way? Do you see any of that, or Baton Rouge, or is it cut and dry, right or left?
I'll give you a good example of what you're talking about, Duke. Rodney Lyons, this session, a black Democrat, is bringing a bill. It's called the Property Rights Protection Bill, which will allow civil recourse for any landowner or any property owner in the state whose property is in any way devalued because of this carbon capture sequestration that's going through the state, that will be going through the state with these pipelines. This ridiculous carbon capture racket where they sequester the carbon that they get from the coal plants, transport it in these pipelines, and then bury it underground. Well, Rodney Lyons, who's a Democrat, you would think a Republican would bring that bill, but he's a Democrat, and it will allow any adjacent property owners to make sure that they have civil redress in court and are compensated based on how much their land is devalued because of this carbon capture stuff going through. And this is a black Democrat, very good private property bill. So I would agree with you that, I'll suggest to you that it is not all cut and dry, not all black and white. There's another Democrat down here whose name is Katrina Andrews, a state senator, who is one of the most pro-life legislators in the state. She has brought a couple of very good pro-life bills, really believes in the dignity of the unborn, and she's a black Democrat.
Wow.
And then you have your Republicans on a commerce committee down here, where you go in there. I don't know how y'all feel about making gold and silver transactional currency in Louisiana, but I certainly am for it. Raymond Cruz, they're doing it over in Texas. They're very close to doing it in Texas. It's basically where you will use You can have gold currency and notes that are backed by gold and silver, and you can use your gold just like a debit card, just like you use money. And let me tell you, with the way that the dollar is being devalued now and wherever that's going, what a great piece of proactive legislation, I thought. And the treasurer was there to explain it, discuss it. I know the Constitution. It's not unconstitutional because we can tender gold and silver in Louisiana and make it transactional. And you know who killed that legislation about 2 weeks ago? Now it's going to come back because we're hammering those Republicans. But that was killed by a Republican Commerce Committee because they had no idea what they were doing or what they were talking about. And the bankers were all over them. Two bankers down there were all over them saying, don't vote for this, don't vote for this. And why don't the bankers want them to vote for it? Because the moment gold and silver becomes transactional currency in Louisiana, people are going to start pulling 10-15% of their money out of the bank. And the banks don't like that because they get to loan all that money out. And so the banks don't want it, but it's good for Louisiana citizens. And there was a Democrat on that committee who voted for it, several Republicans, but it was killed by Rhino Republicans. So we know their names, and we're going to make absolutely certain that they get pressure to bring that bill back, and it's already coming back, and we're going to try to get that passed between now and the end of the session.
Wow.
So it is not all cut and dry. It's not all black and white, Duke, and your inclination to suggest that there's a lot of gray areas here when it comes to Republican, conservative, Democrat, all that. Very true based on what I've seen.
Well, and look, a good example of this is a comment from Christopher James Norris. He generally watches us on Bossier Watch on Tuesday nights, and he's here pretty much all Thursdays. Now, he is an admitted Democrat from Caddo Parish. He says the government of today is way too overbloated. I think if it doesn't fall within the Constitution, then it is overbearing. And I couldn't agree more, and he's a Democrat.
Isn't that's just extraordinary, and I love that. And I'll be honest with you, I'll tell you someone who I think I can never give him too much credit for awakening people and for inviting people to see things from a different perspective, and that's Donald Trump. I mean, I think that he has really I can't tell you the number of black folks that I talk to, Democrats, who are like, Trump's the guy, and because they're sick and tired of the same things that we're sick and tired of. Do you think they like the fact that our borders being invaded and people are just pouring into I don't think black Americans like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think black Americans do as well. And, okay, so you say that. I'm going to challenge you a little bit. You ready?
Yes, sir. Well, I mean, as ready as I can possibly be for you.
Okay, I'm going to go somewhere that, because I got to tell you, it's been on my mind, and I've been aggravated about this. And I don't remember. One of the social media things, I've been going at it with an African American, a friend of mine. He's a friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine. But here's the subject. So, you and I, we all agree, and we think that, Democrats object to this invasion just as much as us. And when I say Democrats, I'm saying the African-American primary Democrats. And, I don't think they agree with this invasion either. But why is it that they're not putting the importance on that issue as what we are? And say, for example, in Caddo Parish in the sheriff's race, that race was a racial race. It was basically black versus white, period. That's what the race was made about. It was not about qualifications. It wasn't about debate and policy. It was about black and white, period, cut and dry. And I don't know that I heard one time from either side, from the Republican side or the black Democrats that were pushing, their side of the equation. I don't think I ever heard about illegal immigration. It wasn't even a consideration in the race. Nothing.
I find that so interesting, and I guess the reason maybe why they are not as outspoken about it as we are is that their general philosophy of government, I think, is more Democrat, uh, more leaning toward perhaps Biden in his general policies, and therefore they're less inclined to be critical of him on something like that. Whereas when we as constitutional conservatives, we already can't stand the guy. I mean, everything that he touches to me goes to crap. And so I'm going to be a lot more inclined to criticize him for the immigration fiasco than maybe a black Democrat who agrees with Biden 60-70% of the time on maybe economic issues, fiscal issues, and other things. So I guess that would be part of the reason why. But
I think it's worse than that. And so let me chime in here for a second.
yeah,
I've told this story multiple times on various shows, but I in my tech business, I have a lot of clients who are African American, black, whatever. And one of them is one of the larger churches in Caddo Parish in Shreveport area. And I'm generally one of the very few white guys in the building, but they've been a client of mine for 15, 20 years. I've helped them with their tech stuff and all that. If you closed your eyes and did not know where you were at and listened to some of the discussions we've had in there, you would almost think it was a Tea Party meeting. Okay? But they tend to vote lock, stock, and barrel Democrat, period. If you have an R behind your name, and I'm being very general because I know the numbers are slowly but surely starting to swing a little bit, and Trump has helped bring some African American black folks over to the Republican side, but it's still a minute number. But they vote lock, stock, and barrel Democrat. I have got a large number of African American black clients and friends of mine. They all know I'm a conservative Democrat. They know I'm a white guy. I carry guns. I drive a 4-wheel drive, and I go bass fishing all the time. And we're friends, and we can even discuss politics, but they refuse to vote Republican. And that to me is the problem. I think it's more of a messaging issue, and I blame the Republican Party as a whole for not being able to overcome the stigma of the Republicans are a bunch of Klansmen scenario. And I think that's the problem.
And well, I think that is the problem. That is part of the perception, and then the Democrat Party they view as the party that is more compassionate, that takes care of them, that is not racist, does not have a history of racial oppression. But really, you're right though. I do think it's a messaging issue, Rex, because when people say that the Republican Party is the party that has to have the dirty tie of racial injustice tied around its neck, that is a gross distortion of history. If it wasn't for the Republican Party, we wouldn't have had the civil rights movement. We wouldn't have had the Emancipation Proclamation. We wouldn't have had Selma. The Democrats historically have been the ones who have been the most antagonistic to civil rights, particularly African American civil rights. And yet we cede that issue like we're just afraid to challenge them on it.
Bingo.
And,
well, and look, go ahead.
You're hitting on all cylinders right there, because here's the thing. You know what? When the first time race comes up in the conversation, we back off. We don't engage, and we don't talk about it. And I think that's the problem. We got to start talking about it. We got to start talking about it across the board with black people and with white people, period. Just like what we're doing right now. We just got to talk about it.
Let me throw this.
Scared. Because I got to tell you, I'm going to say this, Rex. I'm going to go on and say this, Chris. I'm tired of being labeled a racist. You know what? How many times, simply because I'm white, automatically I'm a racist, period. Ain't nothing I can do about it, regardless of whether I've ever had a racist tendency in my body. No matter what, I'm a racist. Oh, okay, great. If you want to make that charge, I'm past that. I'm over it. Okay, now let's debate.
Well,
You've
but
declared I'm a racist.
here's
I'm
the
fine with it. Let's go.
here's the problem and here's the challenge. So the Democrats have pushed forward the narrative of the party switch back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, which we all know, pardon the phrase, is a crock of shit.
Yes, it
All
is.
right. But we as Republicans, for some reason, we're supposed to be all the white people with a bunch of money. We can't overcome that Democratic narrative of a party switch, which never really happened. And so they have hoodwinked not only black America, they have hoodwinked a lot of, white America. They have hoodwinked a lot of the Hispanic America, and they've been able to push this narrative and just keep the lie going for a long time. And we just act like, oh, well, we'll just assume that everybody thinks like we do and life's going to be great and everybody will become a Republican or conservative and all that. And that's just not working. I keep saying this, not black Americans, Democrats and liberals as a whole across the board are breeding faster than we are. And we're not convincing them why being a true conservative, not just conservative in name only, is the better way. Why can't we seem to do this? Nobody can seem to answer that for me.
Well, I look, if we just want to be candid here, Rex, about this, Thomas Sowell, the great economist, who is just truly an icon, black economist and professor, said that it's very, very difficult to divorce oneself from something that has created a sort of institutional dependency. There are a vast majority of Americans, well, in all fairness, both black and white, but a lot of black Americans who have become, because of the Great Society program and because of the New Deal, even beginning with FDR, these vast social welfare programs have become permanent fixtures of our government, which is exactly what FDR warned against even while he was instituting them. And not only did they never go away, they were expanded and broadened under LBJ. And now we live in a country where an overwhelming number of Americans are really institutionally dependent economically on the government. And they associate that dependency with the Democrat Party. And I don't care how good a person you are, when you become acclimated to dependency, it's very difficult to break away from that. And I think that's a very significant part of the reason why it's so hard to break the hold that the Democrat Party has on so many black Americans and on a lot of white Americans too. But we're speaking about black Americans now. They've got them in a hold. And
well, but let me counter that just a little bit. And
yeah.
I know we can't solve the whole problem tonight, but we can have a good conversation about it. So I'll give you an example. This same church is where I learned about crazy checks from the state. And I learned about crazy checks because I was sitting in an office and phone rang. The church official picked up the phone and it was, whoever the lady's name was, and she was wanting to get some assistance from the church and all that. And they turned her down because literally this is what they told me. They told me what crazy checks were, that the lady was spitting out babies so she could get more government money, and the church as a whole just didn't appreciate that, and that's not what they preached. If she needed help, she needed to be bringing her kids up there to their after-school programs and doing all the right things, and they'd be glad to help a church member or somebody in the society. So again, the reason I say that is the problem is not that all black Americans or all Hispanic or all white folks, are totally dependent on it. It's, again, the Democrats have just been masters of pushing this narrative that we can't seem to do. It's all good and well for our politicians, whether they're state or national or whatever, to say they're conservative and stand behind that banner and go take selfies with Trump and do all of that. But when it comes down to it, you can't get the party going in the right direction to bring over enough people to swing the vote.
Yeah.
And we're losing. Trump is an anomaly.
He is. He is an
is.
anomaly. And Rex, and that's exactly why his status as an anomaly is exactly why they're, I think, so afraid of him, and why they are doing everything that they can to take him out. But the Democrats will do anything that they can do, right or wrong, lawless or lawful, to keep the Black Americans under their heel. And if that means regaling them with more and more federal dollars, federal money, then they'll do it. I mean, I really do believe that economic incentive is a very, very strong one. And that's one of the reasons why it's hard for us. Look, I can go in, Rex, and make the most profound philosophical argument for why a Black American should be a conservative and vote Republican, and I can say every single thing that he agrees with. But if he is habituated to being dependent in any way economically on the government, guess who he's not going to be voting for when he goes into the voting booth? An R.
Right. But wait, there's more. So that's a good segue, because we were just discussing these ESAs, these educational savings accounts, and our own local school board literally equated those to segregating schools again. Jason Rowland did it from the Bossier Parish School Board. He equated educational savings account on their podcast, said verbatim, that is causing segregation in schools. You know why?
He said modern day segregation.
Yeah, those were his exact words.
Well, you got to explain this to me.
Oh, wait, there's more. So my point of this is, and this is a good segue, great conversation we're having, it's because the money is not getting, well, I said funneled, Duke said laundered through the Bossier Parish School Board, and so, of course, they're going to be against it. And so it's not just the Black community that's dependent on federal tax dollars. It's our own damn school board that is dependent on the federal money, on the state money, and everything. Look, former Senator Ryan Gaddy, he's watching the show right now. He just sent us a text message. And he is a good example. Now, he raises a good point, but I have had more than one conversation with him about getting matching federal tax dollars in these programs, and how that works with legislation and all that. And he's got a point, and yeah, we need to get our tax dollars back, but that makes us more and more dependent on the federal government. Yeah. It's just this crazy, I don't know how we fix this. I don't know if we can.
Speaking of being dependent upon the federal government, it's so interesting that there's a bill down here, Thomas Presley's bill, very, very good bill that absolutely categorically prohibits Louisiana from ever implementing any health protocol that comes from the tyrannical World Health Organization or any other international health organization, the UN or any other. It's a great bill, but you know why he didn't include the Center for Disease Control in that bill? That Louisiana is not going to divest ourselves from ever implementing those tyrannical protocols like they tried to do during COVID, because the state of Louisiana gets $700 million a year from the CDC and from the federal government. And the Republicans down here are never going to vote for a bill that asserts Louisiana sovereignty against a powerful federal health agency like that when we're getting that kind of money from them every year. And you know what Presley's solution is? He said at some point, both individually and as far as our state goes, we have to get off the federal tit, or we are never going to be sovereign either as individuals or as a state ever again. We are so beholden to federal money. And I think that somehow ties into what you're saying, Rex.
I,
Exactly along the right track. Yes, sir.
and I look, I got to tell you, I agree with what Thomas Presley, the way you articulated it, I agree with it 100%. But let me play the devil's advocate here. And somebody might would say, they said, well, you know what, that's all fine and good if we choose to do that, but you know what, Pennsylvania, Ohio, some of them other states, they're not going to do that. And then what we don't take, they're just going to get, and they'll have extra, and they'll have all that extra money, and we'll just become poor.
Well,
And
they'll have all that extra, Duke. They'll have all that extra with critical race theory in their public schools that teaches citizens, black and white students, to hate each other and to view the U.S. Constitution as structurally racist. They'll have transgender theories. They'll have boys and girls going into the same bathroom. They'll have all kind of leftist ideology poisoning their state. So I guess at some point we have to make a choice. Do we want our sovereignty, even if it requires some sacrifice, or do we want to continue to be beholden under the tyrannical heavy hand of our federal government, and it's only going to get worse, and if we continue to accept all the money? I know it's not an easy choice, Duke. I get it 100%. But at some point, we're going to be buried under a federal and an international regime that we have absolutely nothing in common with as a state anymore if we don't do what we have to do and start asserting our sovereignty.
amen to
So,
that. Well, I teed it up for you, and you hit it just like John Daly.
all right. So,
Well,
let,
I'm not quite as fat as he is, Duke, um,
He can
but I
still
guess
hit that dude way down the fairway, baby.
I know he does.
while drinking a beer and smoking a cigar, too, by the way. So,
They asked him one time, I got to tell you this, Rex. They asked him one time, Tucker Carlson asked him, I almost fell off of my chair. I mean, he said, well, so how many beers can you, something like, how many bottles of vodka can you drink a day, fifths or whatever? He goes, oh, I can drink about 3 or 4 of these and plus about 30 beers. And Tucker's like, in a day? And he's like, oh, yeah, that's no problem. And he acted like it was just a matter of fact. I'm like, I mean, it's crazy. The guy's like a machine.
You're right.
and he'll probably outlive us all.
He very well could.
All right. So, I want to try to, because I got us way off on a tangent. Of course, I got on my
It's a
soapbox.
fun conversation.
It's a great
fun
conversation. We're going to solve everything.
You guys are great. And Duke, I really did enjoy seeing you down here at the inaugural ball, man. It was just really the highlight of the night.
Yeah, I had a really good time. Too good of a time, in fact.
All right, so let's kind of move back to some state stuff for a little bit, and you know, I'll say this as well. So I've had many politicians tell me, "Oh yes, well, I was able to file 400,000 bills while I was a senator, while I was a representative, blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Wait a minute." So the measure of your worth as a legislator was literally filing the quantity of bills that you filed. And if you're having to file that many bills, like we were talking about before the show, laws only restrict you, or they may undo a prior restriction, as in the case of the constitutional carry bill. So if if your worth is measured by filing X number of bills, that tells me there is X number of problems already pre-existing that you're trying to fix, or else you're trying to make the problem worse. Now, let's talk about, in that context, let's talk about some legislation that some of our legislators in Louisiana have filed, both positive or how you view them as positive, and some of them that are negative. So I'll just kind of leave it wide open. Do you have some examples of some good legislation that our state legislators have filed this year?
Well, I have some. I've got, because I knew I was coming on your show, which is one of the greatest ones in the state, and you're up in Bossier. I wanted to kind of lead off here with Stuart Cathy's bill that he just told me about earlier, and you may have you may be hearing it here first, and your listeners as well. But it's SB 221, and what it does is right now the state of Louisiana gets about $8 or $10 million a year of what's called ad valorem taxes for all the rail cars that come rolling through Louisiana, all over the state, all through the parishes. But those companies are not domiciled here. They're just kind of sojourners passing through, but they travel all over the state, all through different parishes. But all of that tax money comes right here to Baton Rouge. It's not distributed to all the parishes that also have rail lines where those trains go through. So Stuart Cathy, who I know it won't shock you is from up your way in North Louisiana, has a bill down here that will equitably distribute every year that money. So if this bill passes, Bossier this year will get, I don't know, $400 or $500 million, and we'll get that annually. Caddo will get about the same.
Wait a minute, you said 400 or 500 million. No, that can't be right.
No, I'm sorry. 400 or 500,000. I'm so sorry, Duke. There is a statistical difference between 400 or 500,000 and 400 or 500 million. 400 or 500,000. Thank you for checking me on that. But that would be annual. That would go to Bossier every year based on the amount of rail line that's down in Bossier. I just think that's a fair piece of legislation, and hopefully that'll get through.
Well,
hold on, Duke. I got a question about this, a technicality on this. They're paying ad valorem tax on the freight that's in the freight cars running down the deal. So you're telling me Bobby Evanston's office has to go out there and not only assess Home Depot and Lowe's and all the other small businesses and homes, they have to assess the tax on the freight cars and rail lines? I wonder how they do that.
Well, this bill, according to what Cathy's saying, would assess the amount of money that each parish gets based upon how much rail there is laid down. Okay. How much rail tracks, not how much revenue is going through there, not how much produce is going. None of that. It's just because that's really the only way to I asked him the same question, Rex, earlier, and he said really the only way to calculate it is just by how much rail track is laid down in each parish, and that's how we calculate it. I know they got some rail up there in Bossier. They got some rail in Caddo. And so that's how they would do it. I don't know exactly how it's going to. And then there are some parishes that have no rail, so they get nothing. But this is one way to equitably distribute this money, and I think it's to have that kind of money coming your way every year is a good thing. So I thought that we lead off with that. I also talked to y'all a little bit earlier about the gold and silver bill. Or do y'all? We can talk. Yeah.
Well, hold up, Chris, because I want to go back to this is a little bit of a wider question and a wider issue. And that bill right there is, Stuart Cathy, he's over from the Monroe area. For folks in Northwest Louisiana, you may not know who Stuart Cathy is, but he's a senator from Northeast Louisiana, still North Louisiana. So with that being said, kind of what we're hearing is that, of course, with Governor Landry, that we're trying to transition the state away from, I think, maybe the state, this old, look, here's the way we've done business. We send all the money to Baton Rouge, then we send our legislative folks down there to try to get that money to come back home, right? Bring the bacon home. So we've been told that the direction we're heading is changing that, and Cathy's bill would obviously do that, is that the money stays at home and doesn't ever even go to Baton Rouge. It stays home, and we're trying to flip government down there all the way around. If that's the direction we're heading, how is what parts of state government that needs to be funded, how's that going to happen? Is there any talk about where this is going and how it's going to be funded?
Are you talking about how our government is going to be funded?
Yeah, because in the big picture, I think what the direction that I've been told we're heading is that we're going to flip it to where we're not sending all this money to Baton Rouge. We're going to allow the local governments, let's say the parish governments, the municipalities, to keep the money, it not go to Baton Rouge, and this to me is an example. I didn't even know that the state was collecting this money. I'll plead my ignorance. I didn't know that. And it seems to be this is a pretty big chunk of money that's going to start coming back to parishes, I guess, that have certain rail that otherwise it would have been going to the black hole of Baton Rouge. So have you heard anything about this fundamental change overall? Is this something we're going to see in maybe a constitutional convention?
Well, I know this. I know that there's a bill down here by Representative Boyu and one other, and I can't think of his name, but it will impose very serious restrictions on the spending cap, how much money can be spent, and it will require a line item appropriation. Anytime the legislature is going to appropriate money for anything, they have to specifically state what it's for, line by line, and an individualized appropriation. And they're doing some other things to streamline the way that money is being spent. Because believe it or not, Duke, this may or may not come as a shock to you, we do squander a good bit of money in this state. We waste money in this state, and they're trying to figure out how we're doing that. And you know what, Duke, you make a great point. We're going to have to begin to tighten the belt. You know why? Because Neil Reiser has a bill down here right now that's going to be set to go before one of these committees in the next few days that will abolish the individual state income tax in Louisiana.
I wonder how well that's going to go over.
Neil Reiser, and I'll tell you guys that this guy is, y'all know who Neil is. Of course you do. And Neil, for about, I laugh with Neil and say, Neil, for about every 5 or 6 things you do that I can't stand, you do one thing that I really like. And if you're able to do this and get this bill passed to abolish the individual income tax in Louisiana, then I'll forget about all the stuff you did that pissed me off. Is that a good deal? And he'll say, well, it's yeah, he goes, I think I can work with that. So I don't know what's going to happen with it, but he's a pretty serious legislator, and I don't think he's bringing this just for his jollies.
Well, okay, so that begs the question then, because I'm sure some legislators are going to scream about a budget shortfall or revenue shortfall, blah, blah, blah. So it's my understanding in Texas that they have no state income tax, but generally speaking, the property taxes are higher in Texas overall. So what do you think they're going to do here if let's say that we get lucky and our friend David Womack in the comments says that it won't pass, but let's say we get lucky and this actually makes its way and the governor signs it. How do you think they're going to try to counterbalance this revenue shortfall, because it's going to decrease the revenue the government can take in?
That's a great question, Rex, and I truly wish I had the answer to that. And that the next time I talk to Neil Reiser, I'll ask him, Neil, how are y'all? Because you know that when he goes and sits in front of the revenue committee, that Rex, they're going to ask him that very question. In fact, several legislators that we've had on our podcast, I've asked them directly, what do you think about abolishing the state income tax? And they always say, in principle, I'm for it and want it, but we have to figure out how we're going to fill the shortfall there. So I'm going to have to ask Neil about that, and I'm hopeful that he'll have an answer to the question when he presents this bill in committee.
Right. And because honestly, it sounds good to eliminate the income tax, but if it's going to be counterbalanced by some other tax increase, well, then really it didn't do any good on balance.
Then what's the point? What's the point? So the only way to make it really worth our while is if that there is, I guess, appropriate cuts or a tightening of the belt in other areas. And of course, that gets into some issues that nobody ever wants their stuff cut.
Right. Exactly. Well, look, of course, I'm going to go down another rabbit hole real quick, but it's like tops. So just to use a phrase that some folks don't like us to use, to circle back for just a moment to conservatism, well, tops. I mean, TOPS is not, the scholarship program is not a conservative principle. But if you cut TOPS, conservatives and Democrats and Republicans and everybody screams from the rafters. So the reason I mention that is because you're right. Cutting one thing is, one person's lobbied effort and all that is somebody else's bill that they just got to have. Or I probably didn't phrase that the right way, but you see what I'm driving at.
I do. There were 19 along these lines of fiscal issue and saving money. Rex, there were 19 Republicans last year who stood strong and refused to vote to bust the statutory spending cap just because we had so much surplus federal money lying around. Enough Republican legislators said, let's get our hands on it. Let's fund the football stadiums and the band uniforms and every port project in the state of Louisiana, whether it goes to critical infrastructure or not. And much of it did not. But they busted the spending cap and they squandered an awful lot of money that we would probably have right now if they had not done that. And so I don't know what the answers to all the questions are for sure, but it sure would be nice to not to have to pay a state income tax and not to have to pay more somewhere else where it doesn't make much of a difference.
Well, Chris, some of the other bills. What were some of the other bills? We get off on these squirrel moments here, and I know you are on top of. I love that bill coming out of Monroe over there. But what's some other bills that maybe we haven't heard about that?
Well, I want to ask y'all's opinion on something. It's a constitutional issue, a constitutional question. And if Ryan Gaddy's listening, I'd be interested in getting his thought on this as well. And we support the legislation, but it's Dodie Horton's bill that would require the prominent posting of the Ten Commandments in every public high school and public school in Louisiana. Now, it wouldn't be paid for by tax dollars. It wouldn't be required. It would be done through, benefactors of the school or local benefactors or whatever to pay for it to display the Ten Commandments in the public schools. I believe that it is a very good bill. I think our country was founded upon Judeo-Christian principles. The very first Bible that was ever commissioned in the United States was commissioned by the U.S. Congress. For the first 160 years of our country, the Bible and Ten Commandments were required reading in the public schools. Abraham Lincoln said the Bible is the greatest book that was ever written. So it would be a shock to our founding fathers that there's a controversy about whether or not the Ten Commandments should be posted in the public schools in Louisiana. So we support the bill, and it looks like it's going to go through and probably be signed by the governor. But you'd be surprised the people sitting down from those committees who oppose it. Think it should be optional or don't want it there at all. It's a violation of church and state. But I think it's a very important bill, very different from the ones we've been talking about, and I personally hope that it gets through. So, what are your thoughts on the Ten Commandments being posted in the public schools in Louisiana, guys?
Go first, or shall I?
Oh, I'm all in on it. I've got you. You're right. I mean, the first New England primer. Prior to the establishment of the public education system and even the Department of Education, everybody, they learned and gathered their education. Basically, it was in the churches. That was where it took place. And you learned your ABCs by virtue of everything written in the Bible. That was how you learned it. And I don't see why we don't go back to that ideology, because frankly, if you think that our education is better now than it was, let's say, at the founding of this country, you don't know your history. Those freaking guys were high school age people, in today's terms, and they were using language that, frankly, I don't think kids today even hear uttered into their ears throughout their whole educational life.
Totally agree.
I mean, so yeah, you better believe I'm on board. I think we went totally in the wrong direction, and this will be a start going back in the right direction.
So my answer is going to be a little bit more interesting, I think, because as a Christian and, conservative, hoorah, all that, I absolutely support the bill. Period. But I'll say with the caveat that while the wall of separation between church and state is, as we all know, was something that Jefferson included his letter. I forget to which government on the issue of the Barbary Pirates, I think, if I remember my history, but correct me.
The Danbury pastors, yes.
Thank you. Okay. So, and so while it is not a literal wall, there is a point that I think, a constitutional point, to not have a state-sponsored religion. Okay? So the slight libertarian leanings that I have in me would say, well, okay, that's fine. But while I don't adhere to the Muslim religion at all, what if a Muslim student or practicer of Islam wanted to have, I don't know, whatever their equivalent of the Ten Commandments is? Would you be, I'll throw the question back. Would either of you be opposed to that? Because if not, or if you're opposed to that, then to me, that's leaning towards a state sponsored religion, because they're literally the Ten Commandments. It's not like they're just putting up a bullet point list saying not to do these things. It'll be, as best I understand it, shown as the Ten Commandments. Now, again, as a Christian and a conservative, I'm all for it. But I also want to give the counter argument for it, because I think in this case, it is actually a fair argument. I'm all for prayer in school, but I'm for Christians being able to pray and Muslims being able to pray, and even the jokesters that subscribe to the spaghetti monster religion, which is mocking God. Well, I happen to support actually their right to do that also. So what say y'all to that argument?
I would say, Rex, that I think that your instincts are very good. I understand your point. I think that your suspicion is that by allowing the Ten Commandments to be posted in the public schools, there is a precedent being set whereby um, there could be more and more of an establishment of a particular religion in the schools, which would be a violation of church and state. And I absolutely understand what the point you're making. The difference, I think, is that our country was founded upon the principles. If you read the writings of our founding fathers, the principles of our country, the basic foundation of our country and our freedom, were founded upon John Locke, the Bible, and which include the Ten Commandments. I mean, that's a foundational anchors of our country. It's not just a quote religion, and so I would argue that to that extent, um, it's far less troubling for me to have the Ten Commandments in the public schools than to say to have maybe the Sermon on the Mount or the Beatitudes, posted in the public schools mandatorily, uh, because I think to me there's a difference. I think those are the Ten Commandments are really foundational principles of the country, and I think it's very. So I'm not troubled by that, but I do understand your point, and I think that it would do a lot of good, frankly, to have the Ten Commandments posted in the public schools. But I absolutely understand your point that even this exercise of what I believe is good could be used and as a pretext for people to really encroach and to really do things that violate the separation of church and state. So I
Well,
understand your point.
yeah, and my part of my slight reservation is because while it's, I feel it's okay to have the Ten Commandments there, that begins a slippery slope, because today's Ten Commandments with the wrong government in place or the wrong set of legislators in place, it could easily go the other way.
Well,
I mean,
Rex,
so
I would
that's my only slight reservation.
so Rex, I would pose a question to you based on your question. Um, it what is a religion and what is not a religion? Because the last I checked, I didn't think that Christianity proposed a form of government. But I
Technically,
do think,
Jesus would probably be a socialist, actually.
but I do think that Islam does delineate a form of government, and I think it delineates that Islam should be like the government, right?
I don't know enough about it, but fair point if so. Yes.
Well, but Duke, I think that is. You're right. I think that Islam absolutely would impose a temporal form of government if they were in power. There's no question about that. But but so would uh, many Christians if they had the unfortunately, many so-called Christians, if they had the opportunity, would impose a form of government that was consistent with their worldview as well. I mean, look what happened. Look at the witch trials in Salem. Look at what some of the hardcore Puritans did early in the country. They were Christians, and yet when they were in power, they visited just unimaginable cruelty on people who they thought were not of their persuasion. And so I think Rex's point that the potential for abuse, I think, exists in any religion. If it's, I mean, look at the Crusades. I mean, it's there have been a lot of people killed throughout history in the name of the Christian religion. And so I understand Rex's point, and I would, again, my point would be I would be much more, even though I'm a Christian, of course, I would be much more alarmed with the posting of the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount in the public school classrooms than I am simply with the Ten Commandments. Because there have been great philosophers in history, George Santayana, who was an atheist, who said the Ten Commandments, he says, I follow the Ten Commandments every day, and I don't even believe in God. That's just a prescription for good living.
Oh.
Everybody should follow the Ten Commandments, but I think you have to be careful that people don't use that as a pretext to go beyond where we are right now.
Look, I'll say this, and I'll get off of this soapbox a little bit. But to me, it's a similar parallel to the Pledge of Allegiance. I had my kids memorize the Pledge of Allegiance. I memorize the Pledge of Allegiance. I say the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance at a meeting if necessary or whatever. But it did start with the Bellamy Salute from an avowed socialist. And it morphed into the hand over the heart and wasn't put in place till, when was it, the 40s or 50s? So again, it's my slippery slope argument that the Pledge of Allegiance was literally started from an avowed socialist. They used to do basically the Nazi salute pre-Nazi days. And eventually that got morphed into what we know as the modern Pledge of Allegiance and then hand over the heart salute. So again, I'm saying that in reference to my slippery slope argument. I'm in full support of putting the Ten Commandments everywhere. But
Rex, it sounds like it's almost like what you just described is the reverse of the slippery slope, because it started off as something very sinister, and it is now something that is quite inspiring and attractive. And I mean, so
yeah, it could go either way.
You're not concerned that the Pledge of Allegiance has established a precedent that could ultimately become sinister, are you?
No, but I am concerned that that the reverse could also be true, but it would be the same parallel, that something that starts out as innocent, we'll say, with the Ten Commandments, could go the other way, just as the Bellamy Salute morphed and changed.
That is a good point. And I'll tell you, if that ever were to happen, I would be, and you would be, I have no doubt, the first to protest it.
Yes.
And to make sure that that didn't happen, because I'm very sensitive to what you're saying about that.
And you won't hear that argument from most mainstream Republicans because, well, they don't even think that far.
That's what you call thinking outside the box, Rex.
Well, all right.
Duke says you do that about twice a year.
About twice a year, yeah. I have a good moment about twice a year, and then that's it.
Well, there's another topic I want to get to, but before we get past legislative stuff, I mean, Chris, some other, real quick, a brief rundown of bills that you want to cover real quick, and then I got one
Duke,
last thing.
Ivermectin over the counter. If ivermectin had been available over the counter during COVID instead of suppressed and vilified the way it was, the whole pandemic would have been different. So there's a bill to get ivermectin over the counter, and hopefully that'll help. That'll help a lot. I love that bill. There is a bill that allows that will forever prohibit any student anywhere in the state of Louisiana to ever get coerced to taking the COVID vaccine ever again. It will be absolutely prohibited, which is a very, very good bill. We've got two bills that were abortion bills. It's amazing how every year these Democrats, every single year, they try to slip abortion back into our state through the legislative process. One of them tried to pass a bill that allowed for it in cases of rape and incest. And another one actually tried to get a constitutional amendment to the people that would simply allow a woman to make the decision. She wanted to get it codified in our Constitution. So we killed both of those. So we're still a pro-life state, thank God. Eccles, listen to this. This guy's is you're going to really like this. Michael Eccles has a bill, and believe it or not, there are a few Republicans who oppose this. Michael Eccles' bill that will prohibit sworn enemies of the United States like China and Iran and countries like that from purchasing agricultural land in the interior of our state.
Did you say Republicans opposed to that?
There are several Republicans who oppose this legislation, and I am sitting to myself going, I'm about to jump out of this chair and strangle you, and I need a good lawyer. But it's a good bill. We're pushing hard to get that through. There are going to be enough Republicans to get it through, and hopefully it'll pass decisively. But guys, believe it or not, getting back to our point earlier, it's just because you're a Republican does not mean that you're a constitutionalist, does not mean you're a conservative. But it's a great bill, and it will protect our agricultural land from our foreign enemies because they're trying to dismantle our infrastructure in any possible way that they can. So that's a good bill. I don't know how y'all feel about the carbon capture sequestration stuff, but there's a bill down here that would repeal eminent domain for private corporations to seize people's land for carbon capture. And that's the law in Louisiana now. They're allowed to do that, sadly, but this bill would repeal that, and it would once again put Louisiana landowners in full control of their own property and not have to worry about it being expropriated by multi-billion-dollar private corporations so they could put these pipelines under their property and store carbon dioxide to help the environment. And by the way, I have to tell you guys this. It's such a racket. This carbon capture sequestration is such a racket. Right now, 0.004% of the environment is made up of carbon dioxide, 0.004%. And of that less than half of 1%. And of that less than half of 1%, human beings were responsible for 3% of that less than half of 1%. And all of this carbon capture stuff to protect the environment from carbon dioxide is based upon what I just told you. It is a complete federally subsidized money-making racket that, there's too much money in it for the legislators to have the will to do anything about it because there's just too much federal money in it.
Which rep brought this bill?
Robbie Carter, who, back to your point, Rex, is a Democrat.
Wow. How about that?
It's a Democrat standing up and saying,
That's good.
you private companies do not have a right to come on people's land and expropriate their property for your carbon capture sequestration projects. A Democrat. And we're
That's
helping that
amazing.
Democrat get this bill passed.
Good.
There's a bunch of other bills. I have to ask y'all, can I ask your opinion? And then we can talk about whatever y'all want to. But we talked earlier about the permitless concealed carry in Louisiana. Right now, permitless concealed carry is on an equal footing constitutionally with permitted concealed carry, which it should be under the Second Amendment. There should be no distinctions made between a law-abiding citizen carrying with a permit or without a permit, as long as they're law-abiding citizens. That's the way it should be. And that's what the permitless concealed carry bill that we just passed did. So it's over, we thought. But now there's a bill being brought that will prohibit permitless concealed carry in the French Quarter of New Orleans. You have to have a government-issued permit to carry your gun, concealed carry, in the French Quarter in New Orleans. And I'm thinking to myself, what is the point of permitless concealed carry if you have to have a permit in one of the most dangerous places in the state?
I want to say something. When are we going to do away with this thing that New Orleans is a different country unto itself in our state? When are we going to do away with that? I mean, they are always, New Orleans is always, we're New Orleans. We're different than everybody else in the whole state of Louisiana. Either they're a part of the state of Louisiana or they're not.
Wait a minute. I'm going to say something that'll shock you, though. Well, maybe not you do, because you kind of know the background on this. So I have been after the map that our governing bodies, local governing bodies, are supposed to produce, which shows all of the gun-free zones within their taxing jurisdiction. Okay? I forget the statute off the top of my head, but it is a statute, and it is required by law. New Orleans is pretty much the only one that actually does this. I get crickets and puzzled looks and responses to emails when I question our local governing bodies. And the reason is I want to show how much of our beloved city and parish up here is actually restricting us from our God-given constitutional rights because of school zones and all sorts of other things. All right. So New Orleans is, apparently they want to carve out again. They have carve-outs throughout our legislative statutes. I mean, I guess my response to that is, well, it's nothing new. If that's what those dummies want to vote for, well, let them have it.
Well, I guess
I don't know any better way to put it.
I think we should invade them and take New Orleans. I think we can do it.
You mean just? I think we would only need us three.
Probably.
Well, speaking of invading, okay, Rex, you're going to have to share screen here. I want to change this up, and I want to get Chris's thoughts on this because I've been stewing on this all week. And this is, let's listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm going to invoke Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let's listen to what she has to say.
Here we go.
For this yesterday, I sent a letter out to my colleagues yesterday morning. The current discussions in our conference meeting this morning is about FISA, but it's pretty clear and obvious and being whispered among the conference. Mike Johnson does not have the support of the conference. The letter that I sent has been well received, and it was basically speaking the quiet part out loud. He's in there urging members to reauthorize FISA. And I don't think he has the votes for it right now, is what I'm gathering. We're going to be working on this. We do not believe in warrantless spying on the American people, especially when this bill carves out the ability for Congress to be notified when a member of Congress is going to be looked at through the FISA court. That's completely unfair. The same thing should apply for the American people. But Mike Johnson doesn't have the trust of the conference, and that's become very clear.
Are you a no on the rule?
Okay.
Wow.
So she went on for about another minute, but I think she pretty much said everything that she needed to say right there. When are we going to have one set of laws for everybody, to whether or not you're Mike Johnson or an elected official, for all Americans. When are we going to have an equal playing field? And what we're talking about here is the FISA renewal. And, and I've got Mike's response asked about it, and we'll cue that up and play that here in a minute. But when Mike was just a congressman and not the speaker, and on the Judiciary Committee, he acknowledged all of the abuse by our federal government, illegally spying on just private citizens of the United States. But now that's not so much the case. What do you think, Chris, about what Marjorie? She's beating around the bush here about, Mike's not where he said he was.
Well, you could call me old. You could call me old fashioned, Duke, but I believe in the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. At least two of our founding fathers said that it was the most important provision of the entire Constitution to be secure in our person and to be protected against unreasonable search and seizure without a warrant. Warrantless seizures are presumed, warrantless searches and seizures are presumed to be fundamentally violative of the Constitution. I think it's outrageous, absolutely outrageous, that the government would be able to engage in warrantless wiretapping, warrantless spying on American citizens without probable cause. But I just think it's a gross violation of the Constitution. I think the whole FISA court, I think, was that not, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, was that not an offshoot of the Patriot Act?
Yes,
That's
basically.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, and before you get out there, somebody finally caught up with Mike, and we call him Walk on Water on the show. And Mike, constitutional conservative. I mean,
Well, I know Mike's read the Fourth Amendment.
Well, he ran on being a constitutional, limited government, conservative, Christian brother. I mean, the whole 9 yards. Let's listen to what Mike said. I mean, he told us why we should elect him and why we should send him to any political office. But now, let's see what he has to say.
When I was a member of the judiciary, I saw all the abuses of the FBI, the terrible abuses over and over and over, the hundreds of thousands of abuses. And then when I became speaker, I went to the SCIF and got the confidential briefing from sort of the other perspective on that to understand the necessity of Section 702 of FISA and how important it is for national security. And it gave me a different perspective. So I encourage all the members to go to the classified briefing and hear all that and see it so they can evaluate the situation for themselves. And I think some opinions have changed both ways, but that's part of the process. You got to be fully informed.
Have you been?
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Duke, because I'm about to get on my soapbox again.
Well, you have to be fully informed, and all of us are uninformed. In fact, we can never be informed. We have to just trust.
Oh, yeah. We can't get inside the SCIF, so,
We just have to trust. And I don't trust. I'm sorry. I don't trust. And what I just heard there was a large percent of our citizens of the United States, constitutional rights. Well, that's okay. They can all be, they can be run over and in the sake of
National security.
Yeah.
But look, you guys are missing the bigger picture here. At least he didn't authorize AT&T and Verizon to have a room set aside for the NSA like the old days, where they could literally suck up every communication call that you made back in the old days like they used to do. He's doing us a favor. At least they're only doing warrantless searches.
So Rex, you're getting back to the point you made at the start of the show, where people sort of are being habituated to believing that it's the government who in its benevolence grants us our freedom and grants us our rights, instead of simply existing to secure rights that we already have. So basically, look. I've always had a good relationship with Mike Johnson. I think he has done some good things since he's been the speaker. I have to tell you, frankly, this disturbs me. And it disturbs me because he's asking us to, basically, he's asking us to trust the government instead of demanding that the government be transparent to us. And that's something, I mean, it's like they are accountable to us, the people. And it's like he's suggesting, and I'd love to get his clarification on this. He's suggesting that it's okay to violate the fundamental constitutional rights of American citizens as long as the end in sight, which is to national security, justifies it. Well, I don't think there's any end that justifies a fundamental violation of our constitutional freedoms. I just don't believe it. And he seems to be siding right there, and it's quite troubling to me. Now, look, to give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe he's looking at something inside this room that is critical to national security, that really requires the government to be able to take liberties with our constitutional freedoms in order to protect us. That's his argument.
But okay, Chris, I got to stop you. But isn't all of the ilk in Washington D.C. isn't that going to always be the case? Isn't it going to? That's
It's
going to be
always
the
something.
case.
Yeah, it's always national
be
security.
your safety and mine. We're doing it for your benefit. And oh, by the way, we can't tell you why. You'll never know. You'll never know. That's going to be.
That's a recipe. That is a recipe for tyranny, boys. A recipe for tyranny.
It's not just a slippery slope. It is an absolute slip and slide, and Mike Johnson is on the slip and slide, skating down there, laughing all the way to the bank.
And I bring this up to say, of all the people, I mean, look, Mike won overwhelmingly in this congressional district. I mean, if the point is, and I hate to say this because I'm just going to say it. I'm not biased here. I don't care. I've said it before. I don't trust Mike. Mike lost my trust a long time ago, but he sold everybody, made everybody trust him. And, you know, if Mike Johnson is not a politician that you can trust, will there ever be a politician that we can trust? Is there ever going to be one that you know, he used all of the things that would make somebody like me vote for him? I mean, the next guy that comes along, I don't know that I can trust anybody that comes along, right?
Did you vote? But you voted for Mike, dude.
You know, I really don't remember. I think that I abstained from voting.
I think, Duke, you are correct. I think you refused
I think
to vote.
that I abstained from voting because I knew Mike Johnson would do just what he's doing right now. He proved to me a long time ago when he first came along. I held Mike in high regard. I thought that Mike, everything that he said, it matched up philosophically with everything that I believed. I couldn't see myself, you know, having a different belief system than what he is. But then he proved to me, you know, in my dealings with him and made me suspect that what I believed and what he believed weren't the same. And he's now made it to the top. Let's face it, he's at the top. The only thing he could do higher is be POTUS. And is he upholding the beliefs he said that he believed? And is he upholding what we believe? Right now, I don't think he's doing that. But what he's saying is that you just have to trust me. You just have to trust me. What Reagan say to that?
Yeah, Duke. Or is there any other example that comes to mind where you think Mike is not towing the line?
Well, let's talk about the budget. Let's talk about funding abortion in the last funding bill. I mean, there was abortion funding in there. He said that he was going to fight. I didn't see much fight. He was the one pushing out there and whipping votes. I mean, do we make compromises on that if we're against abortion?
Yeah. Where do you
Apparent,
compromise? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
apparently that's okay now. I mean, so I don't know. It
How
wasn't
is
ever
he on the
okay
Ukraine
before.
funding?
Say again.
How is he on the Ukraine funding?
Oh, he's all in. Let's keep shoveling money to him. Keep on shoveling it. Anyway, I hate to be the show killer here, but I'm just
No, I understand your point, and I always, I'm always try to be somewhat sympathetic, because it just seems like when you get in that position, and I know that nobody forced him to do it. He wanted the position. I guess it's just so easy to compromise when you're in that situation. And I can't explain it. You said earlier, Rex, that I think you described Trump as an anomaly, and you know what? That's such a great word for him, because I've never ever seen anyone anywhere on the public scene like him. For all of his imperfections, for all of his failings, I trust him more than anyone else that I see on the public scene or ever have in my life. I trust him more than I trusted Reagan, and I trusted Reagan a tremendous amount. There's something about Trump that is just true. And I just feel like if Trump were in the position Mike Johnson's in, even though I know Mike Johnson likes to stay close to Trump and likes to let people know that he's close to Trump, if Trump were in that position, do you think Trump would be signing off on warrantless searches of American citizens, or warrantless seizures, or spying? I don't know. Do you?
Well, I'll have to go back and check and see what legislation Trump went through while Trump was in office to accurately answer that. Here's my take on Trump, and I've said this many times before. I voted for Trump the first time. I voted for Trump the second time, and I will vote for Trump again only for SCOTUS picks and judicial picks. I don't care if he runs around naked on the White House lawn with a bunch of hookers doing cocaine. I don't care. Do I think Trump is a true...
Yes, you do.
No, I really don't, as long as the SCOTUS picks and the judicial picks are fine, because they have already given us many Supreme Court decisions that have been very good. A few not so good.
Well, if he did that,
good.
if Trump was doing that, that just meant he found the Hunter Biden's cocaine that was lost.
Exactly. He found the map on the laptop to get to it. But in all seriousness, I don't have any reservations that I think Trump is what I would consider as a true conservative. I really don't. I think he is conservative enough. I agree with you that even though I don't agree with everything Trump does, I trust that the reasons he does things are valid and that he feels that they are the right things to do. All right. And so while I don't completely align with you on the thoughts on Trump, I think we are mostly aligned on that. And that is absolutely why I'll vote for him again. No problem.
But you forgot about, Rex, you did forget about one thing. It can't just be about judicial picks and that sort of thing because of the border.
Well, true.
That's a massively important issue. If we don't get that under control, we have no country.
Yeah, well, I have thoughts on that too, but
I agree with that too. And you can look at the statistics. And Trump, when he had his 4 years, I mean, he reduced, the illegals coming across more so than anybody had done. But I want to go back to a point and agree with both of you, because both of you made a point regarding Trump, and I'm going to agree with you by telling you a story and a real life experience. And I'm going to conclude with this. So in 2016, when, at the inauguration, when Trump was being sworn in, I was fortunate to be able to be there, had a seat up in the front. And that morning, you have to get there really early, and it was before the sun had came up, and it was raining. me and my wife, Kara, we literally are sitting there in the rain with ponchos. I mean, because it's pouring down, I guess, but we wanted to get there early. We were high achievers. We beat everybody. And so we're sitting there in our seats. The rain's beating down, and, Trump's not coming out until later in the morning. And, it started getting right about the crack of daylight. And the rain stopped. The clouds started breaking. You could tell that the sun was about to come up. And then all of a sudden, the skies opened up, and you could turn around, and if you know from right there at the Capitol, you can turn around and you can see the Washington Monument in the distance. And when the sun came through the clouds, it was like it shined only on one place, and it shined on the Washington Monument, and it lit up with a glow that I can tell you it was only the only way it was possible was providence. And I tell you that to say, I think Trump doesn't even know his purpose. He doesn't even know. I think he is the tool of something greater than any of our understanding. And I think the outcome is preordained. I believe that. And, once in a lifetime, yeah, y'all are right. Absolutely. He's a once in a lifetime guy. And I believe it from that moment, that day at that inauguration.
Amen to that.
That is powerful. Duke, that is powerful. You actually gave me chills when you were telling that story. That's very moving. And when you say that you don't think that Trump necessarily knows his purpose, I would agree with you there. And you look out at history, at the great leaders that God has called throughout history to do extraordinary things. They've always been deeply flawed men. They have had huge weaknesses and vulnerabilities, but God calls, and many of them, I guarantee you, did not understand at various times in their public life what their purpose was or what they were supposed to be doing or why God was calling them to do certain things. So that really speaks to me when you say that Trump may not understand what his purpose is. But clearly, he's been, in my view, appointed for this time in our history. And without him, for all of his vulnerabilities and weaknesses, without him, in my view, I don't know that the republic will survive. I think we absolutely have got to have him. I don't see anybody else who can do what I think he has the capacity and the heart and the willingness to do, despite all his imperfections.
I agree 100% with that. All right, Mr. Lowry.
Well, Chris, hey, we appreciate you coming on. I know that we went really sideways. I mean, we went to religion, we went to racism, we went to legislature, we even went to DC, all over the map. I enjoy having the chat. I really do. And I would encourage everybody watching the show and the people that see this video afterwards to y'all go support LACAG. They're doing some good work down there. Chris and his group are on top of the legislation. They're squeezing legislators, trying to help steer things, for the benefit of everybody in the state. And they do a good job, and we should support them. Chris,
I agree with that.
Close us out?
I appreciate you, boys. I just appreciate you guys more than y'all realize. You're two great Americans, and whenever it's time for us to go seize the city of New Orleans, I just don't see, Duke, why we need to. I don't see why we need to involve anybody else. I'll just be the driver. Rex, I'll let you get in the back seat, passenger, and Duke, you can be the wingman up front, and we'll just go impose some martial law over there, and we'll have a fun and maybe have a cold beer when we're done. It shouldn't take us more than a few minutes.
Just a couple of minutes. I would agree that would be a good time.
You hit that right.
I really enjoyed it.
All right. Good night, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you all. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, we did go all over the map. We talked about education, conservatism, hookers, cocaine, taking over New Orleans with a 3-man elite team. I mean, I don't know what else we could have covered.
I don't know. Even the fact that your truck won't go 140 miles an hour.
I forgot to cover that too. I guess I should have put the disclaimer that hypothetically speaking, I might have been doing that out on the road because now I just admitted to violating the law multiple times, but whatever.
But you didn't say where. I mean,
Yeah, well, I did admit to going through I'm not going to say it again. So anyway,
yeah,
we'll leave it at that.
Enough of that. Enough of that.
Yeah, y'all folks out there, don't tell anybody else about this. We'll keep it between us. So.
Yeah. So look, the LACAG, they have a bunch of different little chapters all over the state. I think they even have one in Bossier, and I'm not sure about the one in Caddo. And encourage everybody to kind of check them out. They report quite a bit on different legislative issues. I did not know about Stuart Cathy's bill. Going to try to get that money distributed across the state to the parishes that have the railroads tracks. I had no idea. I can only guess that
it was news to me.
I can only guess that they're licking their chops up there in Benton at the police jury. More money.
Yeah, more money. So, and look, next time I'm sitting there waiting on a train, I guess I can just imagine dollar signs going by for David Montgomery and another statue and, all those sorts of great things.
Hey,
but that's for another show on Tuesday nights.
Yeah, speaking of the king and David and the city and all that, hey, Tuesday night on Bossier Watch, we're lining up a pretty good show on that, an informative one that folks are going to want to pay attention to, especially in Northwest Louisiana.
Yeah, it should be very interesting. I think we're going to have some information out there that maybe not a lot of folks are aware of, and we'll be sharing that out. So make sure, if you're new to the show, make sure you follow us over on Bossier Watch. Just look for Bossier Watch, one word, on Facebook. Also, subscribe to Bossier Watch and Louisiana Watch on YouTube. That is very important. We're trying to increase our YouTube presence. And then, if you get bored, go on over to the Outdoor News on Facebook, and again, subscribe on YouTube. And we're starting to post some interesting videos there. I'm doing a lot of fishing videos. You're blowing up beaver dams and catching eels. And just all sorts of fun that we're having.
Fun stuff. So, hey, I enjoyed it, Rex. Thank you so much for a good show again. And see you next time, my friend.
I'm going to hit the finish button. See you on Tuesday night, my friend.